The bitter chill of winter clung to the desperate mother as she stepped into the pawn shop, her fingers clenched around the only thing she had left of value, her wedding ring. The small bell above the door jingled, breaking the silence of the nearly empty store. She hesitated, her feet rooted to the scuffed wooden floor. This wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was the last piece of a life she once had, a life that felt like a dream compared to the nightmare she lived now. Behind the counter, the shop owner, an older man with tired eyes, studied her. He had seen all kinds of people walk through his doors, some desperate, some greedy, some just looking for a quick sale. But the look in this woman's eyes was different. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I need the money." She carefully slid the ring from her finger, hesitating only a second before placing it on the glass counter. The shop owner picked it up, examining the band, the diamond that still gleamed despite the years. "Good quality," he muttered. "I can give you." The words faded as something caught her attention. A shadow, just beyond the window. A figure standing outside, watching. Her heart pounded. Was she imagining it? The cold air from the open door swirled in as another customer entered, momentarily blocking her view. When she looked back, the figure was gone. "Best I can do," the shop owner was saying. "It's not a bad offer, considering the market." She blinked, forcing herself to focus. The price he quoted wasn't much, but it was enough to buy food for her kids. Enough to get through another week. She pressed her lips together, steeling herself, and reached for the paper to sign. But just as she lifted the pen, the bell jingled again. Someone had stepped inside. And everything was about to change. The pawn shop fell silent as the door creaked shut behind the new arrival. A gust of cold air swept in, raising goosebumps on the desperate mother's skin. She tightened her grip on the pen, forcing herself not to look up. "Go ahead," the shop owner urged, his tone neutral but expectant. "If you're sure." But now, she wasn't sure at all. Something about the presence behind her made her uneasy. The air in the shop had shifted, heavy with something unspoken. Slowly, she turned. A man stood just inside the doorway, his expensive overcoat dusted with snow. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. It couldn't be. But it was. Her ex-husband. The man who had once vowed to love her forever. The father of her children. The billionaire who had vanished from her life without a single explanation. The pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the counter. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The shop owner, sensing something tense and deeply personal unfolding, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Should I give you a moment?" She ignored him, her pulse thundering in her ears. The man, her ex-husband, took a hesitant step closer. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice quiet, almost cautious. Something inside her snapped. Talk to her? After all these years? After abandoning her and the kids with nothing? Her chest burned with rage and disbelief. She turned back to the shop owner, her hands trembling. "Take the ring," she said sharply. "I don't need it." Her ex flinched as if she had struck him. "Wait." She shoved the papers toward the owner, but before she could sign, the man reached out and grabbed her wrist. The touch sent a jolt through her, memories flooding back in an instant. The nights they had spent laughing, the way he had once held her when life felt unbearable, the love she had sworn was unbreakable. But those memories were ghosts now. She yanked her hand away. "Don't touch me," she snapped. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But please, just hear me out." She scoffed. "Why would I?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because it's about the kids." Her blood ran cold. The shop owner stiffened, looking between them. Listen, I don't know what's going on here, but maybe you two should take this outside. She could barely process his words. Her mind reeled. Her ex's eyes were filled with something unsettling. Guilt. Urgency. Something that made her stomach twist into knots. For years, she had told herself she would never let him back in. Never give him the satisfaction of seeing what he had done to them. But if this was about her children? A storm raged inside her, but one thing was clear. She needed to know what he wasn't telling her. And she wasn't sure she was ready for the answer. The air outside was bitterly cold, but she barely felt it. Her ex-husband stood in front of her, his expensive coat shielding him from the wind, while she shivered in her thin sweater. The contrast was almost laughable. She crossed her arms tightly, trying to keep her voice steady. You have exactly 1 minute to explain why you're here. Then, I walk away. His jaw tensed. I know you don't trust me. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You think? His eyes darkened with regret, but she refused to let it affect her. Not now. Not after everything. I left to protect you, he said finally. The words hit her like a slap. Protect her? Her heart pounded with anger. You left me with nothing, she shot back. No money. No home. I had to raise our kids alone. And now you expect me to believe you did it for my sake? He flinched but didn't back down. I had no choice. You always had a choice, she snapped. And you chose to walk away. Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I know you hate me. You have every right to. But if you don't want to listen to me, at least think about our kids. They're in danger. The words sent ice through her veins. Danger? Her motherly instincts kicked in, but she refused to let panic take over. What are you talking about? I can't explain everything here, he said, glancing around. Just let me inside. 5 minutes. If you still want me to leave after that, I will. She hesitated. Every bone in her body told her to slam the door in his face. But if he was telling the truth, if her kids were truly at risk, could she afford to ignore him? Her mind warred with itself. Behind her, the lights in her small apartment flickered through the window. The kids were inside, warm and safe, for now. She took a deep breath and made her decision. Fine, she said finally. 5 minutes. No more. He nodded, relief flashing in his eyes. But as she turned to unlock the door, she didn't notice the black car parked down the street. Or the shadowed figure watching them from a distance. She led him into the dimly lit apartment, her heart thudding in her chest as if it could burst through her ribs. The kids were asleep in their room, unaware of the tension building just a few steps away. The door shut behind them with a soft click, and the silence was almost unbearable. She turned to face him, arms crossed, her posture rigid. Start talking, she said, her voice clipped, demanding answers. Her ex hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering toward the hallway where their children slept. I never wanted you to find out this way, he said quietly. But now, I don't have a choice. She raised an eyebrow. You could have started by not abandoning us, for starters. He didn't respond. Instead, he dropped his coat onto the couch and paced the small space, clearly agitated. Why did you leave? She pressed. What could possibly justify just disappearing, leaving us to struggle? His eyes darkened, his face clouded with pain. I didn't have a choice. She scoffed. Everyone always says that. You don't get to walk away and then play the victim. I wasn't playing the victim, he snapped. I was protecting you. Protecting all of us. The word struck her hard. He hadn't been some cruel man who just left them to fend for themselves. He was trying to explain something deeper. "Protect us from what?" she asked, her voice softer now, though she couldn't quite hide the lingering skepticism. He sat down at the kitchen table, his hands rubbing his temples. "There's a lot you don't know. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "There were people, powerful people, who forced me to leave. People who had a stake in my business. They threatened me. They told me that if I didn't go, they'd hurt you. Hurt our kids." Her stomach twisted into a knot. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. This was madness. "Wait," she said after a beat. "You're telling me this was some conspiracy?" He nodded, his eyes dark with the weight of his past. "Yes. They wanted me out of the way. They didn't care about us. They didn't care about our family. They wanted control. And I—" The words trailed off, his voice breaking as the memories seemed to overwhelm him. "I had no choice but to leave," he said, almost pleading. "And the worst part is, I thought you'd be safer without me. But now, I've learned the truth." She wasn't sure whether to believe him, but her heart had already started to race. Something in his eyes, something deep and raw, told her he wasn't lying. "And now?" she asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Now," he said, standing up, "they're coming for you too. And I won't let them take you, not after everything that's happened." The blood drained from her face. The reality of his words hit her with the force of a freight train. Her breath caught in her throat as she glanced toward the hallway. Her children were asleep, blissfully unaware of the danger closing in. "How do you know this?" she whispered, her mind racing. He looked away, his voice lowering. "I don't have time to explain everything. But trust me, they know who you are. They know where you live." Her knees buckled, and she stumbled back toward the couch. She felt like the walls were closing in around her, suffocating her. "I'm sorry," he said, kneeling beside her, his voice full of regret. "But I'm not leaving. Not again. I'm going to protect you, both of you, whether you believe me or not." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. Her fingers shook as she picked it up, the screen lighting up with an anonymous message. "Don't trust him." The room seemed to spin as she read the words again. Her ex leaned over, his eyes narrowing. "Who was that?" She held up the phone, her pulse racing. "Someone knows." He swore under his breath, his face hardening. "I was right," he muttered. "They're watching you. We need to leave, now." She looked at him, her mind still reeling from the shock. But one thing was certain, whoever had sent that message, they were not going to stop until they had everything they wanted. And she wasn't going to let them take her kids. Not without a fight. The cold air outside had nothing on the chill that ran through her veins as the weight of his words settled in. Her ex stood by the window, scanning the street with a practiced eye. The tension in the room was unbearable. There was no denying it now, there was a real threat, one that couldn't be ignored any longer. Her hands were still trembling as she set the phone down on the table. She wanted to trust him, but after everything, how could she? "Who would send a message like that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to face her, his face tight with frustration. "There are too many enemies. I don't know who's behind it yet. But I know this, they won't stop until they get what they want." Her stomach churned. The vague threat of "they" was far too real now, too close to home. But she couldn't help but feel a flicker of doubt. After all this time, could she truly rely on him? "You left us, and now you're asking me to trust you," she said, her voice breaking despite her efforts to stay calm. His eyes softened, but there was no mistaking the urgency in them. I didn't want to leave. I had to. There were things I couldn't explain then, but I'm telling you everything now because we don't have time. They'll come for you, tonight. Her heart skipped a beat. Tonight? How do you know? I have my ways, he said, glancing out the window again. I've been keeping tabs on you from a distance, making sure you were safe. She recoiled slightly, the thought of him watching them, even from afar, making her uneasy. That's not comforting. I know, he admitted, but it was the only way I could protect you without drawing attention. I never meant to be a threat. But right now, we have to be smart about this. They know where you are. They're already here, and if we wait too long, they'll make their move. Her breath caught in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to call the police, to get help, but she knew deep down that wouldn't be enough. And yet, part of her still wanted to shut the door on him and pretend nothing had changed. But another part of her, the part that had kept her up countless nights, worrying for the safety of her children, knew he was right. She ran her fingers through her hair, frustrated and terrified. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to trust. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. They're after both of us, but if we move quickly, we can get out ahead of them. Her mind raced, weighing the impossible choice. She couldn't run forever. But could she truly trust him again? Was there even a choice? Before she could say anything, her phone buzzed again. She snatched it up, the screen showing a new message. They've already found you. You won't be safe for much longer. Her breath caught in her throat. How? She whispered, almost to herself. Her ex looked over her shoulder at the screen, his jaw tightening. It's them. They're tracking you. He didn't wait for her to respond. We have to go. Right now. For a long moment, she stood frozen, staring at the message, her mind spinning. But the fear in his eyes, the same fear that she could see in herself, shoved all her hesitation aside. Get my kids, she said, her voice firm, despite the pounding of her heart. He didn't hesitate, turning swiftly toward the hallway. She moved toward the door, her mind a storm of confusion, terror, and doubt. What if it was too late? What if they were already too close? She grabbed her purse from the table, stuffing a few essentials inside, her hands shaking. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and then the door to the children's room opened. Her ex appeared, cradling her youngest in his arms. The child was still asleep, oblivious to the panic that had suddenly overtaken their lives. We've got to move, he said, his voice grave. She nodded, her chest tight. The idea of leaving, of running, filled her with dread. But the alternative was worse. Her ex walked past her toward the door, the child nestled protectively in his arms. Her eyes followed him, and for a fleeting moment, she saw the man she had once loved, the man who had promised to protect her. But that man had left her once before. Could she really put her trust in him again? Let's go, she said, her voice stronger now, determination flashing in her eyes. Together, they slipped out into the night, but in her heart, the weight of uncertainty still loomed large. The night was quiet, too quiet. The world outside seemed to hold its breath, but for her, every moment felt like a countdown. Every creak of the floorboards underfoot, every flicker of light in the distance, made her heart race. Her ex had led them down the narrow street toward the old car parked at the curb, the headlights casting long shadows across the pavement. He didn't look back, his focus sharp, his eyes scanning every movement around them. She followed behind, her instincts telling her to hurry, but at the same time, to be careful. They reached the car, and he opened the back door, gesturing for her to get in. Her youngest, still sound asleep in his arms, shifted slightly as if sensing the tension. The older child, her daughter, was already in the back, buckled in, looking out the window with wide eyes. Is everything okay, Mom? her daughter asked, her voice quiet, almost uncertain. Her heart ached as she looked at her, trying to maintain a calm face. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just some things we need to take care of. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Nothing was fine. Nothing would be until they figured out who was behind this, and why. Once they were all in the car, her ex slammed the door and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and they drove off into the night, the city lights blurring past them. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The silence between them was thick with unasked questions, old wounds, and fears of the unknown. For what felt like hours, they drove without saying a word, the city lights growing more distant as they headed toward the outskirts of town. Every now and then, her ex would glance into the rearview mirror, eyes narrowed, scanning for any sign that they were being followed. "Where are we going?" she asked, finally breaking the silence. He glanced at her briefly, his jaw set in determination. "I have a safe house. It's not far." She swallowed hard. She didn't want to rely on him. Didn't want to put herself in a position where she was at his mercy. But she had no choice. And worse, she still didn't know who they were running from, or why. Her mind raced with questions. "What's this all about?" she asked, the fear and frustration in her voice impossible to hide now. He was silent for a moment, then spoke slowly. "It's never been about the money. It never was." She didn't understand. "What do you mean?" He exhaled sharply, eyes glued to the road. "I don't know how much you remember about my business, but it's complicated. I was betrayed. By someone I trusted." She shook her head. This wasn't making sense. Betrayed? By who? The people who control everything. My own brother. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't seen it coming. The shock of his words was enough to make her stomach turn. "Your brother? But, why? Why would he?" "Power, greed, control," he muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "You wouldn't believe the kind of things he's been involved in. And when it got dangerous, I had to disappear. But not before I found out what they were planning." She sat back, her mind reeling. Her ex was telling her things she couldn't comprehend, things that seemed too surreal to be true. And yet, the danger in his eyes, the urgency in his voice, made it clear, he wasn't lying. "The same people who went after me, they're after you, too," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. She felt a cold sweat break out on the back of her neck. "What do you mean, after me?" "They want you to stay silent," he said, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror once more. "They want control. And they'll do whatever it takes to keep you from speaking out. From exposing them." The words hung heavy in the air, and her thoughts swirled. They weren't just after her ex. They wanted something from her too. But what? As they neared the outskirts of town, her heart started to race again. The questions she had were growing too fast for her to keep up with. The unknowns, her ex's betrayal, his sudden return, the mysterious enemy, were spinning in her mind, a web of confusion and fear. The car finally slowed as they pulled into a secluded area. The house ahead was hidden by thick trees and the darkness of the night. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt secure. Her ex turned off the engine, and the silence stretched between them once again. He glanced at her, his face drawn with exhaustion and concern. "We're safe for now. But we don't have much time." As she stepped out of the car, her heart pounded in her chest. What had she gotten herself into? And what had he gotten them into? They walked toward the house, and the door creaked open as her ex reached for the handle. They stepped inside, the weight of the night's events hanging over them like a storm cloud. She looked at him, her breath catching in her throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me what was really going on?" His gaze softened, and for a brief moment, she saw the man she used to love, the man who had promised to protect her. But now, all she could see were the cracks in his story. "I didn't want you to get involved," he said quietly. "But it's too late now. And I can't protect you unless we face this together." Her ex had made his choice, but now she had to make hers. And somehow, she knew that the hardest part was still to come. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound being the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch as if they were alive, lurking, waiting for something to happen. She paced back and forth, her mind racing. The safe house was supposed to be a refuge, a place where they could hide until everything blew over. But it felt more like a prison. Her ex was speaking with someone on the phone, his voice low and urgent. Every few moments, he'd pause and glance at her, but he didn't offer any explanations. He was trying to reassure her, but she could see the tension in his posture, the way his jaw clenched. Then, without warning, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Her heart skipped a beat as she pulled it out, hoping for some kind of message, some sign that things were going to be okay. But the message that flashed on her screen made her blood run cold. "Your son is safe for now. But if you want to keep him that way, you'll need to do exactly as we say." A chill crept up her spine as she read the words again. She gripped the phone tighter, her hands shaking. "What is it?" her ex asked, stepping toward her. Her voice trembled as she read the message aloud. "They have him, they have our son." His face went pale, and for the first time since he had returned, she saw true fear in his eyes. "No, no, this can't be happening." He rushed to the door, pausing only to give her a look. "I need to make a call. Don't move from here. It's too dangerous." But she couldn't stay put. Not when their child was out there, alone and in danger. She couldn't let him face whatever was coming without knowing his mother was fighting for him. As soon as he left, she grabbed her jacket and stormed toward the door. But the moment she reached for the handle, she froze. A sound, soft, almost imperceptible, came from behind her. A voice. "Mom." She spun around, her heart nearly leaping out of her chest. It was her daughter, standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with concern. "Where are you going?" her daughter asked. The words caught in her throat. She couldn't explain it to her daughter, couldn't tell her the terrifying truth. "Not yet. We need to find your brother, sweetheart," she said, forcing a calmness into her voice that she didn't feel. Her daughter stepped closer. "I want to help." The mother hesitated. She wanted to protect her child, to keep her away from all of this chaos, but the look in her daughter's eyes was one of determination. She had inherited her strength. "You can't. It's too dangerous." "I'm going alone," she said, though part of her knew it wasn't true. But the moment the words left her mouth, she heard a sound from the driveway, footsteps, soft but quick. She froze. Her ex was back. "Where are you going?" he demanded, his voice harsh with worry. She turned to face him, and for the first time, she felt like she was in control. "I'm going to find our son." He hesitated, his eyes darting to her daughter. "We don't have time for this." She clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside. "You don't understand. I can't just sit here while he's out there, scared. We're doing this together." Her ex didn't argue. He simply nodded, grabbing his coat and his phone as they prepared to leave. "Let's go." The three of them, mother, daughter, and ex, stepped outside, the cold night air biting at their skin. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. The phone call had come from an anonymous number, but they all knew the truth. It was someone who had been following them, watching their every move. The threats, the warnings, the fear, they were all part of a game, a twisted game of cat and mouse. And their son was the bait. As they reached the car, her ex slid into the driver's seat without a word. Her daughter climbed into the back, and the mother sat silently in the front, her mind focused on the task ahead. "Where do we go?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "To the warehouse," he replied. "Warehouse," she repeated, confusion washing over her. He glanced at her. "It's where they're holding him. I've been there before. But we need to move fast. No telling how long they'll keep him there." She nodded, even though every inch of her screamed to turn back, to find another way. But she couldn't back down now. As they drove toward the warehouse, the tension in the car was unbearable. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, regret, and hope. Could they really get their son back? Could she trust him? The miles stretched on, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. She thought about her son, about how small he was, how much he needed her. And she thought about the stranger who had come into their lives once again, her ex, the man who had walked out of their lives years ago. Was he the same man who had once promised to love her? Or had the years changed him too much? As they neared the warehouse, she felt her heart pounding faster. They were getting closer. The question was, would they make it in time? The warehouse loomed ahead, its silhouette barely visible against the dark sky. The moon was covered by thick clouds, casting the world in a gloomy, uncertain light. As the car slowed to a stop, the mother's pulse quickened. She could feel the weight of the situation in her bones, the dread, the fear, and the strange hope all coiled together like a storm about to break. Her ex didn't need to say anything, his knuckles were white against the steering wheel, his gaze locked on the darkened building ahead. He had been here before, but not under these circumstances. "Stay close," he said, his voice firm, almost commanding. Her daughter nodded, but the mother could see the unease in her eyes. She understood. This wasn't just about finding their son, it was about facing the man who had torn their lives apart all those years ago. "Let's move," the ex said. They got out of the car, the cold air biting at their skin as they moved quickly toward the entrance of the warehouse. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound their footsteps on the gravel, echoing in the night. When they reached the door, he paused, pulling out a small set of keys. He unlocked the heavy metal door with a practiced motion, then gestured for them to follow. The warehouse inside was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from a few flickering overhead lights. It smelled of dust, oil, and the faint metallic scent of rust. Their footsteps reverberated as they moved cautiously through the aisles of stacked boxes and machinery, the sound unsettling in the silence. The mother's heart thudded in her chest as they moved deeper into the maze of the warehouse. Every instinct told her to be afraid, but she couldn't stop. Not now. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions, not when her son's life was at stake. Finally, they reached a small room in the back of the warehouse. A single figure stood in the doorway, blocking their path. It was him. The man who had betrayed them all. The billionaire's brother. "Why?" she breathed, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. Her ex didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the side, his gaze fixed on the man in front of them. The tension between them was palpable, the history of betrayal and power evident in every subtle movement. The man in front of them, her ex-husband's brother, smirked, his eyes glinting with a mix of arrogance and satisfaction. "You thought you could run forever, didn't you?" he sneered. "Where's my son?" the mother demanded, her voice stronger now. "Your son? He's fine, for now," the man said, his smile widening. "But I suggest you stay quiet if you want him to remain that way." The air in the room grew thick with tension. Every nerve in her body screamed for action, for answers. But she knew she had to be patient. If she made one wrong move, she could lose her son forever. "You don't know who you're messing with," her ex said, his voice low but dangerous. The brother laughed. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm messing with. But you're too late. Everything's already in motion. You won't win. He stepped aside, revealing a small figure tied to a chair in the center of the room. Her son. Her heart stopped. He was there, alive, thank God, but the fear in his eyes was enough to tear her apart. No, she screamed, rushing toward him. But before she could take another step, the brother raised a gun, aiming it straight at her. One more step and I shoot. This ends here. Her ex stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the gun. You think you can control everything? You've been playing with people's lives for too long. This ends tonight. The brother's smirk faltered for a split second, and the mother seized the opportunity. Let him go, she demanded, her voice trembling with raw emotion. The man laughed again. You think you can just walk in here and demand things? It doesn't work like that. But her ex had already moved. In one swift motion, he tackled the brother to the ground, knocking the gun out of his hand. The sound of the struggle echoed in the room, a wild, desperate energy fueling their movements. She rushed to her son, cutting the ropes that bound him, her hands shaking. It's okay, baby. It's okay, she whispered, even as the chaos swirled around her. Her ex was on top of his brother now, pinning him to the ground, his face a mask of fury. This is for everything you've taken from us, he growled, his fists landing on the man's chest. But the brother wasn't done. With a growl of anger, he twisted and fought back, landing a blow to her ex's side. For a moment, the fight hung in the balance. The mother grabbed her son's hand, pulling him away from the struggle. We need to get out of here, now. Her ex looked up at her, pain in his eyes, but his focus never wavered. Go. I'll finish this. She hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. There was no time for second-guessing. Go, her ex shouted again, and she didn't need another push. She ran with her son, her heart racing, her mind filled with nothing but the need to get them to safety. The sounds of the fight faded behind them, and the door slammed shut. They were free. But as they sped away from the warehouse, the mother couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The final act had yet to play out. The journey back home felt surreal, as if the world had shifted on its axis. The car was silent except for the occasional sound of her son's soft breathing. He had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, exhausted from the ordeal. The mother's heart still pounded in her chest, but her thoughts were in turmoil. She couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. After everything, the betrayal, the fear, the fight, what came after? Could she really forgive him? Could she ever see her ex-husband the same way again? Her ex's presence in the car beside her was a strange comfort, but also a reminder of everything he had walked away from. Her heart ached as she remembered their past, how they had once been a family, how they had once dreamed of a life together. But dreams could shatter, and the past could never be undone. The silence stretched on until they reached her home. The car came to a stop in the driveway, and she glanced at her son, still sleeping peacefully. She could hardly believe it. He was safe. They were all safe. Her ex turned to her, his face weary but determined. We made it, he said, his voice raw. We're safe now. She nodded but couldn't bring herself to respond. Her mind was racing with everything that had happened, and she knew there was still one final decision she needed to make. Her ex sighed, looking out the window, avoiding her gaze. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, he said quietly. I don't expect you to take me back. But I want to make things right. Her chest tightened. It wasn't just the danger or the money, it was the trust. He had broken it, and that was the hardest thing to repair. You left us, she said softly, her voice trembling with the weight of the years. You walked away when we needed you the most. I never told the kids the real reason you left. I couldn't. It would have hurt them too much. He flinched, his eyes closing as if the words had struck him. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt them. But I was. I was forced to make choices I never wanted. And when I finally had the chance to return, he paused, swallowing hard. I was too late. I should have come sooner. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words pressing against her chest. She had spent years resenting him, blaming him for every hardship they had faced. But now, in the quiet aftermath, she could see the pain in his eyes. He had truly suffered too, in his own way. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered, the words heavy and final. But I can't keep holding on to all the anger. I have to let it go, for the kids, for me. Her ex nodded, his face etched with regret. I understand. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm not the man I was. She looked at him, her heart torn between love and anger, forgiveness and pain. But somewhere deep inside, she knew she couldn't keep carrying the weight of the past. I don't know what the future holds, she said, her voice steady. But for now, we start again. Together, as a family. He met her gaze, and for the first time in years, she saw a glimmer of the man she had once loved, someone who was ready to make amends, to try again. The lesson she had learned in all this was simple, yet profound. Love was complicated, forgiveness was a choice, and second chances were rare but worth fighting for. Life had a way of knocking you down, but you had to rise again, even when it felt impossible. And, in the end, it was about choosing to move forward, together. As the night settled around them, the mother sat quietly in the car, her son safe beside her and her ex-husband by her side. A long road lay ahead, but she was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun.